Alright, this is a little out of character for me, but it's about a week and a half until Tarnished Edition releases on the Switch 2. And considering the dearth of Soulsbourne games that there are on the Nintendo consoles, I figured I'd just do everybody a little bit of a favor and give you a quick rundown of how to not make a complete horsewater character in Elden Ring. Take it from, a vet. I'm not going to make this like in depth. I'm not going to like teach you how to make a specific like incredibly strong build that can do X, Y, or Z. I'm just going to give you the basic guidelines of how to make a character who is not too weak to get through the game unless you are like playing perfectly. And most people are not going to be playing perfectly, especially if the game has performance issues, which it probably is going to because they're trying to get Elden Ring running on a Switch 2. Alright? Now, when you start the game, you're going to be presented with all of these starting classes plus 2 extra ones. And that's not really important because your starting class is a suggestion. It is not predestination. You can take this knight here and you can turn him into a wizard. You can take this wizard here and turn him into a knight. They might not be absolutely ideal for doing either of those things, but they can still get pretty good at it because your starting stats are pretty low. So all you're really looking for is to see which stats you're never going to level, which is usually going to be the bottom 5 stats. A couple of them you're going to want to have relatively minimal, if not like no points at all. Just pick the lowest stats there and go, which is why, incidentally, the Vagabond right here is very often the most optimal class to be because really low arcane and intelligence and faith are pretty low if you don't want to invest into those. And if you do want to invest into those, they've got enough strength and dexterity that they can use a wider variety of weapons than, say, this guy with 8 strength, 12 dexterity, right? So, the TLDR, I'm going to give you the overview very quickly. You can learn how to make a non-BS character in like 30 seconds. Vigor, 40 minimum, preferably 60 at some point. At level as soon as possible. High mind if you're going to be casting a bunch of spells. High endurance if you're not and you're going to be swinging a lot of weapons more often. And then you pick one of those 5 stats right there and you just take it up to 80 at some point. Be about level 150 by the end of the game. And you're done. Now, to go a little more in depth on what I just said, those first 3 stats, Vigor, Mind, and Endurance, are what I like to call the big bar stats. You have a health bar, an FP bar, basically mana, magic, whatever you want to call it, and a stamina bar, red, blue, green. Vigor makes the red bar bigger, Mind makes the blue bar bigger, Endurance makes the green bar bigger. Now, they also have other side effects. For most notably, the higher your endurance, the more gear you can equip on your character, heavier armor, bigger weapons, and still be able to dodge effectively, avoiding what they refer to as fat rolling. And you'll know if you're fat rolling. And that's generally more important if you're not casting a lot of spells because your big bonk is going to be more important, right? And then the last 5 stats, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, arcane, are what I like to call big number stats. Those are the things that allow you to do big numbers to the bad guys and basically kill them quicker, because the quicker they die, the less time you have to die. So, most of these are generally pretty self-explanatory if you have any experience with RPGs at all. Strength means you can use bigger bonks. Dexterity means you can use faster bonks. Intelligence means you can throw blue lasers at people. Faith means you can throw red and or yellow lasers at people, as well as heal. And Arcane is a little bit weird. It is the item discovery stat. It increases the drop rate, which isn't super important. But it is also used to be able to cast certain more esoteric spells. It is used to make weapons that cause status effects better, and there are a handful of especially unique weapons in the game that run off arcane that often have unusual and very often stat dependent, especially bleed and poison type effects, right? So basically once you get your vigor up to 40, you start putting stats into one of those 5 in order to use the weapons you want. Everything else you keep to the minimum of whatever it is it requires you to use, because weapons and spells have like stat requirements. Like if you want to use a broadsword, you basically just need 10 strength, 10 dexterity. If you want to use like a banished knight halberd, you need 14 strength, you need 12 dexterity. And if you want to use like the great sword, as in the what's referred to as the gugs, the guts ultra great sword, you're going to need like almost 40 strength, I think. And their spells are the same thing. Like your little pew pew laser is like 10 intelligence, your big pew pew laser is 50 intelligence, that sort of thing. So another thing you can do is you can take 2 of those stats and you can kind of raise them up, but not as much as you take the other one. So instead of like 80 in strength, you'd go 45 in strength and 45 in dexterity and kind of make that work. Those sorts of hybrid builds are usually a little more complicated to pull off, so I don't recommend them for beginners. Like I'd say if you're a beginner, just pick one of those first 4 stats especially and just focus on that. Go strength, get yourself a big bonk. If you've got dexterity, get yourself, a graceful bonk, like katana or something, or spear or something. Intelligence, get yourself a staff and just throw lasers at people. Faith, you're generally going to be either like lighting people on fire or throwing lightning at them, maybe throwing like divine circlets at halos at people. But there are some other more esoteric things, and I'll get into that here in a second when I talk about the hybrids. And arcane is, I would not recommend arcane for like your first playthrough, because it is a little more finicky of a stat to run off of. Now, if you combine strength and dexterity, that's what's referred to as a quality build. Quality builds tend to be better at much higher levels. Like if you've got 80 points to put in something, you get more damage putting it into either strength or dexterity and like having a weapon focused on one of those stats than to take that same weapon, quality infuse it to split it between those 2 stats and just have a 40 and a 40, you won't do as much damage. The difference being is that if you get those stats up to like 80 and 80, then you're going to be doing pretty good damage. But unless you're like trying to make an over-leveled build, most people max out at like 150 to maybe 200 in the DLC. Not usually worth it. I wouldn't recommend it for beginners. Now, strength and intelligence, that's also doable. There's a handful of unique weapons that you cannot like customize, but that run primarily on strength and intelligence. Those can be fun to play around with. Stuff like the Falling Star Beast Jaw. You don't get a special catalyst for it, so your spells aren't going to be as good. You can use cold infused weapons if you want something customizable. It's doable. Not the easiest thing to do, but it can be fun. Strength and faith, that's more of your beast spells and like your paladin type builds. Again, there's some unique weapons that run pretty well off both those stats. There's a special spellcasting seal that runs off those 2 stats, although it isn't all that great, even with those stats being very high. But you can still make it work. Then you've got strength and arcane, which is good if you're making like a hybrid bonk bleed build, stuff with like the great stars or morning stars, something like that. And there's a couple of like really unique weapons that are quite good that run primarily off strength arcane. I'm thinking mostly of like the Mogwin spear or the Mirai executioner sword, which if you're new to this, those words aren't going to mean much to you, but once you find them, you'll know what I'm talking about. All right. After that, you've got dexterity and intelligence. Classic combination because dexterity does slightly increase spellcasting speed. You can also use the cold infused weapons. You'll just be using the lighter cold infused weapons instead of the heavier ones. There's no specific spell catalyst for it, but the extra speed can kind of make up for it, even if you're not getting as much damage out of the intelligence as you would as a pure spellcaster. Solid choice. All right. Dexterity and faith, kind of the same deal. It allows you to use more lightning infused weapons because for whatever reason those don't run off faith, they run off dexterity, but lightning spells run off dexterity. A little bit of a oversight in terms of their balancing as far as I'm concerned, but again, some unique weapons. Increased spell casting speed is kind of nice. and Faith has a lot of buffs and a lot of more utility spells compared to Intelligence. Still a fairly decent choice. Dexterity and Arcane, same as Strength and Arcane. It's good for Plead. If you're using like faster type weapons like, katanas and whatnot. The Rivers of Blood, unique weapon, runs off Dexterity and Arcane. It's not nearly as good as it used to be. So don't think you're going to pick it up and just start winning fights left and right. It's good now. It's just not great. But it's still a fun weapon. And there's a couple of other fun weapons. The Reduvia and whatnot. You can get that one really early off. Dex Arcane, solid choice if you want to go that way. All right. Intelligence Faith. That is one of my personal favorites. It starts off a little slow. You're never going to have quite as much spellcasting oomph as a dedicated Intelligence Faith caster, but you get access to a couple of unique spells that do require both. Especially in the DLC, you get some unique catalysts that'll run off both. And it just gives you access to a wide variety of spells that you otherwise would not be able to combine, and it is very fun. It is a more advanced kind of build, though. All right. Intelligence Arcane. I do not recommend that one. There's only one base game spell catalyst that runs off Intelligence Arcane, and it's not super great. There is another one in the DLC, which the way it functions is kind of weird because you're actually wanting to cast faith-based sorceries on a staff that scales on Intelligence and Arcane, if that makes sense. Maternal Staff is weird, but there's only 2 spells in the entire game, including the DLC, that actually require Intelligence and Arcane. One of them's pretty good. The other is absolute dog water. And you're going to have a little bit of issues possibly with weapon selection because there aren't really any weapons that run well off of Intelligence and Arcane. There aren't that many weapons that run very well off Faith and Intelligence, but the few that do exist are pretty fun. Not as good as they used to be, but still pretty good. Sword of Night and Flame, etc., etc. And then finally, Faith Arcane. That is a big one. That is a good combination because it gives you access to the Dragon Communion spells. And the Dragon Communion spells are basically the mag dump spells in this game. They are blue bar hungry. They hit like trucks. They're kind of slow, but they're really fun. And again, starts off a little slow. You have a little bit of problem with weapon selection because you're probably going to just be using like arcane-focused weapons that are going to be doing slightly suboptimal damage because of your investment in Faith. But there is a really good spell catalyst that runs off Faith Arcane. It is available very, very early in the game if you know where to look. And once you get a couple of dragon spells under your belt, Faith Arcane, very fine choice. And that's pretty much it. Those are your main, like, not getting into the weeds, min-maxing with really weird choices type things. Just level your vigor. I cannot emphasize this enough. You want that red bar as big as possible. And the gains really drop off after 60. They really pick up between about 25 and 40. So your main priority when you start a character is to get your vigor to 40. Then get the stats you need to just use your weapons and spells. Then get your vigor to 60. And then start leveling up everything else you need. Getting your endurance, your mind, your big bar stat, your big number stats, wherever you need them to be. And if you do that, you should be running relatively optimally for the entire game. And assuming you don't mind beating your head against a brick wall until the brick wall gives up, you're going to have a fun time because it is an excellent game. Cannot recommend it enough. All right, it's been about 15 minutes. I think we'll wrap it up there. And take care and have fun, Nintendo fanboys.